Tomorrow, England and Argentina walk out onto a pitch in Atlanta for a World Cup semifinal. And the moment those anthems hit, something is going to happen to every single player on that field that has nothing to do with tactics or fitness. It's going to happen before a single ball is kicked, and it quietly determines everything that comes after. A historic World Cup rivalry is being renewed, and it has been 20 years in the making. But this video isn't a history lesson. What I want to talk about is something most people covering this match completely miss: the actual psychology of what happens to a player's brain when they step into a rivalry this loaded. Because rivalry is defined as a competitive relationship that increases the psychological stakes of competition independent of the objective stakes. In other words, the history makes this game feel bigger than a World Cup semifinal already is, and that feeling changes everything about how it gets played. There's one thing about this match that I haven't seen anyone talk about yet, and I'm going to get to it at the end because it's the most counterintuitive truth about rivalry games in football. Stick around for that one. So let's start with the thing that hits both teams before they even lace their boots. Most of the players who will be on that pitch in Atlanta were kids, or not even born yet, during the moments that define this rivalry. The hand of God in 1986, the Beckham red card in 1998, and yet every single one of them arrives carrying the full emotional weight of those chapters. That's not an accident. Psychologists call this collective memory. A group internalizes the meaning of events it never lived through as if it did. The fans pass it down, the media replays it every 4 years, and the national story bakes it in until it feels personal. So both squads show up to Atlanta already knowing this match means more, and that belief spikes their arousal and tension before the referee even checks the ball. Here's why that matters. Rivalry in competitive environments has long been recognized for its psychological impact on participants. While rivalry often drives performance by creating motivation and focus, it can also impose significant mental challenges. The right level of emotional charge is actually a performance enhancer. Research shows that athletes facing rivals demonstrate 30% more dedication to training and 20% higher success rates in critical moments. So rivalry genuinely helps. The problem is that there's a ceiling, and when you push past it, the whole thing flips. The limbic system becomes disconnected from the frontal cortices that handle decision-making and problem-solving, which is responsible for basic emotions like anger. The mechanism that regulates cognitive control gets inhibited, and that increases the probability of disruptive or violent behavior. In plain English, too much emotion and a player stops thinking clearly at the exact moment they need to think most clearly. The rash tackle, the lost temper, the red card that changes everything. From the infamous hand of God in 1986 to David Beckham's red card in 1998, the most iconic moments of this rivalry aren't moments of genius. They're moments of emotion overwhelming discipline. And that's the tightrope both teams walk on Wednesday. Now here's the layer that makes this particular match even more dangerous psychologically, and this is where it gets really interesting. Research shows that prolonged exposure to high-pressure situations associated with rivalry can lead to decision fatigue, which can ultimately result in poor performance during crucial moments of the competition. And both of these teams have already been through the ringer to get here. England advanced to the semifinals after defeating DR Congo, beating Mexico while playing most of the second half with 10 men, and then overcoming Norway 2-1 after extra time in the quarterfinals. Argentina reached this stage after beating Cape Verde after extra time, coming back from 2-0 down to defeat Egypt 3-2, and beating Switzerland 3-1 in extra time. Both squads are physically and mentally depleted, and now you're asking them to absorb the full psychological weight of the biggest rivalry in international football on top of that. The decision-making errors that come from fatigue and rivalry pressure compound each other. That's a recipe for chaos, and that's exactly why these games produce the moments they do. If you're finding this useful, drop a comment below. I want to know which moment from this rivalry you think still lives rent-free in players' heads the most. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the kind of content we do here, so hit that button before Wednesday. Now, layered on top of the fatigue and the arousal is the revenge narrative, and this is where it gets genuinely dangerous for both teams. When a rivalry carries a lasting sense of injustice, and this one carries decades of it on both sides, it hands a team a powerful motivational story. We're righting an old wrong. That narrative can supercharge belief, unity, and intensity in a way that no team talk from a manager can replicate. But rivalry produces behavioral effects with respect to goal pursuit, identity maintenance, and moral decision-making as distal consequences. A mind fixated on revenge starts chasing the moment. Players force the killer pass, chase the crunching tackle, try to be the hero of the story, and desperation is the enemy of good decisions. The desire to settle a score can lift a team or it can blind them completely. Sometimes both, in the same 90 minutes. And then there's the identity piece, which is the one nobody really talks about. One of international football's most storied and fiery rivalries is set to ignite after a 20-year hiatus, and for both sets of supporters, this isn't just a match. Losing to this particular opponent doesn't feel like a normal defeat. It feels like failing your entire nation against the one rival you most needed to beat. These individuals experience momentary self-regulatory failure precisely when their identity feels threatened. That fear of losing, specifically losing to Argentina, specifically losing to England, raises the emotional stakes far beyond what a standard knockout game produces. And fear, as always, tightens muscles and narrows thinking at the exact moments a player needs to be free. So here's the thing I promised you at the start. The most counterintuitive truth about rivalry games in football. The research suggests that rivalry can be a double-edged sword with both positive and negative consequences. But when you look at the biggest rivalry matches across football history, a pattern emerges. The team that wins is almost never the one that wanted it more emotionally. It's the team that channeled the passion into sharp, present-tense focus, while the other side got swept up in the narrative. The weight of history is a trap. The revenge story is a trap. The team that treats it like a rivalry loses its composure when the game tightens. The team that plays with cold clarity controls the chaos around it. England has only won 2 of its 6 matches by more than 1 goal, and it hasn't won by more than a single goal since the knockout stage started. And yet it is set to compete in its 4th ever World Cup semifinal, in large part due to something past iterations of the team have lacked: mental toughness. The reigning world champions enter the semifinals on a flawless run, being the only side yet to drop a point. Lionel Messi is in historic form, currently tied atop the Golden Boot race with 8 goals. 2 teams, both carrying history they didn't create, both supercharged by a rivalry that raises the psychological stakes beyond what the scoreboard can measure, both at risk of the same trap, letting the story of the match consume the match itself. At the start of this video, I said something was going to happen to those players before a ball was kicked. Now you know exactly what it is and why it matters more than any tactical breakdown. The team that walks into Atlanta and plays the game in front of them, not the 1986 game, not the 1998 game, not the revenge game, that's the team that walks out into the final. If you want to go deeper on the mental side of football, I've got a video right here that breaks down exactly how the best players in the world manage pressure when everything is on the line. Watch that next.